Chapter 1. The First Glimpse. Emily had always been skeptical about the supernatural. Ghost stories, urban legends, and so-called paranormal experiences seemed like nothing more than exaggerated fiction. But all of that changed. On a cold November evening when she saw something she could never explain. Something that shattered her sense of reality. It all started with a notification on her phone. Motion detected in the hallway. At first, she didn't think much of it. Living alone in a small apartment, she had installed security cameras months ago for peace of mind. False alerts weren't uncommon. Shadows shifting, light changes, or even bugs triggering the motion detector. But when she opened the app to check the footage, her breath caught in her throat. The screen showed her apartment door slowly creaking. Open. That wasn't possible. She had locked it. She was sure of it. She glanced toward the front door from where she sat on the couch. It was shut. Not even a crack of space visible. But on the screen, it was wide open. Emily's chest tightened. Maybe it was just an old recording. Maybe the app had glitched and pulled up older footage. But before she could convince herself of that, something else happened. A figure stepped into view. Her stomach lurched. It was a woman, her height, her build, her hair, but she couldn't see the face. The woman peeked from the hallway, her head tilting slightly, as if she knew she was being watched. Emily's hands trembled as she zoomed in on the footage. And then she saw it. The woman on the screen looked exactly like her. Not just similar, identical, and then she smiled. Emily's blood ran cold, because she hadn't moved from the couch. Her hands tightened around her phone. Her mind screamed for logic, for reason, for any explanation that wasn't impossible. But there was none. She forced herself to look up from the screen. The hallway was empty. No open door. No figure. No one there. Yet the footage showed her double, standing there, grinning. Emily wanted to breathe, wanted to tell herself it was a trick of the camera, a weird malfunction, anything to make sense of it. But then, the double moved, and Emily heard the soft creak of the hallway floorboards, right behind her. Chapter 2. Something in the shadows. The air in the room felt thick, like an invisible pressure was squeezing against her chest. Emily's mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to move. Slowly, she turned her head. Nothing. The hallway was still empty. The door was closed, the floor untouched, yet the sound of creaking floorboards still echoed in her ears. Her heart pounded like a war drum as she looked back down at her phone. The footage was still there, still playing. But something was wrong. The double was gone. Emily's fingers hovered over the screen, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Had she imagined it? Was she just seeing things? Then, a new notification popped up. Motion detected. Living room. Her stomach twisted. She was in the living room. Shakily, she clicked on the alert. The screen flickered. The live feed loaded. And then she saw herself, standing directly behind the couch. Emily's vision blurred as adrenaline surged through her veins. She was sitting right there, but on the screen she was standing too. The figure's face was turned downward, hair covering her eyes. And then, as if sensing Emily's terror, the double's head snapped up. Its eyes locked onto the camera and it smiled again. But this time, Emily felt breath on the back of her neck. Chapter 3. Messages from nowhere. Emily screamed, leaping off the couch so fast that her phone tumbled from her hands. She stumbled backward, crashing into the wall, her eyes darting around the room. Nothing. She was alone. The air was suffocatingly silent, except for the erratic pounding of her own heart. Her phone lay face down on the carpet, the screen still glowing. She didn't want to pick it up. Didn't want to see what might still be on it, but she had to. With trembling fingers, she reached down and turned it over. The video was gone. The camera feed had cut to black. Her notification bar showed a new message from an unknown number. You need to leave. Now. Emily stared at it, her throat dry. The message had been sent less than a minute ago. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Who is this? She typed. Immediately, the typing bubble appeared. Then, another message. She knows. You saw her. Emily's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as she looked up, scanning the room. Every shadow seemed deeper, every dark corner more sinister. Then, another message. Don't turn around. Emily's entire body froze. She felt a presence behind her. Her skin prickled. The room felt colder. And then, the whisper. Soft. Close. Just want to be you. Emily turned, and standing just inches away was herself. Chapter 2. Something in the Shadows. Chapter 4. The Wrong Reflection. Emily couldn't move. Her own face stared back at her, except it wasn't hers. The woman in front of her had the same features, the same body, the same clothes. But something was off. Her eyes were too dark, like endless voids. Her smile was too wide, stretching in a way that felt unnatural. And worst of all, she wasn't blinking. Emily's mind screamed at her to run, to do anything but stand there frozen. The double took a step forward. You're not real, Emily whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The doppelganger tilted her head, as if considering the words. And then, neither are you. Emily's stomach dropped. The room tilted around her, the walls seeming to bend inward. This isn't happening. This isn't real. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe. 1, 2, 3. When she opened them, the double was gone. But the whisper remained. I'll be back. Chapter 5. The Mirror. Knows Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat curled up in the corner of her apartment, the lights on, every mirror covered with blankets. She wanted to believe it had been a hallucination, a trick of the mind. But the messages were still on her phone. The footage of her double standing behind her was still saved. Something was very, very wrong. At dawn, she grabbed her laptop and started researching. Doppelgängers. Paranormal phenomena. Reality glitches. She found stories. Thousands of them. People claiming to have seen their own reflection move out of sync. Others who received phone calls from themselves. But one post stood out. A woman had written about seeing her own double in her apartment, just like Emily had. She described the same eerie smile, the same dark eyes, the same whispers, and the last update she had posted. If you see your double, don't look in the mirror. That's how it gets stronger. Emily's breath hitched. Slowly, she turned toward the only mirror she hadn't covered, the one in her bathroom. Her heart pounded as she stepped closer, gripping the edge of the sink. She hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she looked. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Her reflection stared back. At her, tired and pale, but normal. Then, her reflection blinked. Emily hadn't. She stumbled back, slamming the bathroom door shut, and from the other side, the mirror knocked. Chapter 6. The Rules of Survival. Emily couldn't stay here. She grabbed her keys, threw on her jacket, and ran out of her apartment without looking back. But the feeling of being watched never left her. As she drove aimlessly through the city, her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. With shaking hands, she answered. Hello? A long pause. Then, Emily, a voice whispered. Her entire body tensed. Who is this? She demanded. Another pause. Then, in her own voice, you know who I am. Emily slammed the phone down, her breathing ragged, She needed answers. She found herself in front of an old bookstore tucked between two abandoned buildings. It looked like it had been forgotten by time, but something pulled her toward it. The bell jingled softly as she stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and aged paper. Behind the counter, an elderly woman peered at her. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she said. Emily stiffened. "Seen what?" The woman sighed, as if she had heard this 1,000 times before. "Yourself, the wrong version of you." Emily's mouth went dry. "How do you know?" she whispered. The woman slid a worn, leather-bound book across the counter. The title read, "The Rules of the Doppelgänger Curse." Chapter 7. The first rule, Emily's hands trembled as she flipped open the book. The first page was simple. Rule number 1. Never speak to your double. It will learn. It will become stronger. Her blood ran cold. She had already broken that rule. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, it was watching, waiting, growing. Chapter 8. The second rule. Emily's fingers trembled as she flipped to the next page of the book. The dim lighting of the bookstore made the old yellowed paper seem even more ominous. The letters looked as if they had been burned into the page. She swallowed hard and read aloud. Rule number 2. Never look at it for too long. The more you see it, the more it sees you. Her stomach twisted. She had stared at her double for at least a minute before it disappeared. What does that mean? Emily looked up at the old woman behind the counter. "What happens if I've already broken the rules?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The woman sighed, her expression grim. "Then it knows you now. It's part of you." Emily felt cold. The woman pointed to another section of the book. Emily's eyes darted across the page. The more it sees you, the more it becomes you, and if it fully becomes you... She hesitated. Then she turned the page. "You will fade away." Her breath hitched. "Fade away? People don't just disappear," she said aloud, trying to convince herself more than the old woman. The woman only shook her head. "Not disappear, Emily. Replaced." A wave of nausea rolled over her. She wasn't safe. "How do I stop it?" she asked, gripping the counter. "How do I make it go away?" The woman hesitated, then flipped further into the book. The next page contained something new. Not a rule, a warning. Emily read it out loud. "If it speaks your name 3 times, it can cross over." A chill ran down her spine. She remembered the phone call. "Emily, who is this?" "You know who I am." She had heard her name twice. Her breathing quickened. One more time, and it would be here. Chapter 9. The reflection in the window. Emily drove back home as fast as she could. The city lights blurred past her, but all she could think about was what the woman had said. Replaced. How many people had this happened to? How many had seen their reflection move when they didn't, only to disappear days later? How many doubles were out there, pretending to be real? She parked outside her apartment building and hurried inside. The air in her apartment felt wrong. Colder. Quieter. She stepped toward the bathroom where she had last seen the reflection. The mirror was uncovered. Her heart pounded. She was sure she had covered it before leaving. Had someone been in here? Slowly, she stepped forward. The reflection looked normal. No twisted smile, no dark eyes. Just her. And then, her reflection raised its hand. Emily's real hand stayed at her sides. Her reflection waved. "No, no, no, no." She stumbled back, slamming against the wall. The reflection stepped forward. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. Unknown caller. Her stomach dropped. She knew what was about to happen. The moment she answered, the voice would say it, her name, a third time. And then, it would be here. The phone rang again, and then, with an eerie calm, the reflection in the mirror smiled. The phone stopped ringing. A notification popped up. New voicemail. Emily's heart pounded as she tapped the screen. A robotic voice spoke. First, new message received today at 3:33 a.m. Then, a pause. And then, her own voice. Emily. Emily's vision blurred. The air grew thick. Her reflection was grinning now, ear to ear. Then, Emily. Her knees nearly buckled. She tried to move, to run, to break the mirror, to do anything. But then, Emily. The mirror shattered, and the last thing Emily saw before the darkness swallowed her was herself. Smiling, stepping forward, crossing over. Chapter 10. Who is real? The world felt wrong. Emily opened her eyes. She was in her apartment, her bed, her room. Everything looked the same. Was it a dream? She slowly sat up. The cold sweat on her skin told her it wasn't. She turned her head toward the bathroom. The mirror was whole, untouched. Had she imagined everything? Maybe the stress had gotten to her. She let out a slow breath, shaking her head. That's when she noticed her phone on the nightstand and the notification on the screen. New voicemail. Her stomach twisted. With shaking hands, she picked up the phone and pressed play. At first, there was only silence. Then, a whisper. Good morning, Emily. She dropped the phone, and from the bathroom mirror, something knocked. Chapter 1. 11. The knock. Emily's heart froze. The knock came again, a slow, deliberate tap against the glass. Her breathing turned shallow. She didn't want to look. She knew what she'd see. But something in her body betrayed her. Her head turned. The bathroom door was open. The mirror stood in full view. And in it, something moved. Emily couldn't see it clearly, but she could feel it. A presence. Like a shadow just out of reach, shifting just enough to let her know it was watching. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. She flinched, barely managing to keep hold of it. A new text appeared. Unknown number. You're awake now. That means I am, too. Her stomach twisted into knots. She didn't type anything back. She didn't have to. 3 dots appeared on the screen. It was still typing. A second message popped up. Come look, Emily. Her chest tightened. No. No, no, no. Her fingers clenched around the phone. She turned away from the bathroom, forcing herself to stare at the floor. If she didn't look, maybe it couldn't hurt her. Another message. If you don't look, I'll make you. And then, the knock on the mirror turned into a pounding. Chapter 12. The voice in the mirror bang. The mirror shook. Bang. The glass trembled, distorting her reflection. Emily curled up on her bed, squeezing her eyes shut. Her phone buzzed again. New voicemail. Her hands trembled as she brought the phone to her ear. A deep static filled the speaker. Then, a whisper. Why won't you let me in? Emily's eyes snapped open. That voice. It wasn't hers anymore. It was deeper. Wrong. The lights in her apartment flickered. Shadows twisted in the corners of the room. The mirror rattled. She couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and hurled it at the mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The pounding stopped. Silence filled the room. For the first time in days, Emily felt like she could breathe. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was over. But then, her phone vibrated one last time. She looked down. A new message. Unknown number. Breaking the mirror doesn't break me. The temperature in the room dropped, and from behind her, a whisper. Now I don't need the mirror anymore. Chapter 13. Something is. Here. A cold breath touched her neck. Emily spun around. There was nothing behind her. But she felt it. The air was thick, heavy, like something was there, something just outside her line of sight. She stepped back, her heart pounding. Her reflection was gone. The shards of broken glass on the floor no longer showed her face. They showed something else. Something that looked like her, but its eyes were hollow, and it was smiling. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. Her phone vibrated again. Unknown number. You shouldn't have done that. Then, a second message. Now you have nowhere to hide. The lights in her apartment went out. The darkness swallowed everything. And then, the whisper came again. Closer. You can't run from yourself, Emily. Chapter 14. Nowhere to hide. Emily froze in the darkness. The air was thick with silence, pressing down on her like a suffocating weight. Her phone screen was the only source of light now, casting a faint glow onto her trembling fingers. A new message appeared. Unknown number. I'm closer than you think. Her breath hitched. The message was followed by a single attachment. A photo. With shaking hands, she tapped to open it. Her blood turned to ice. The image showed her standing in the middle of her own apartment. Her back was turned, but she recognized the pajama shirt she was wearing. The dim lighting, the angle. It was taken just now. Someone had taken a picture of her, but she was alone. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she turned her head. Nothing. The room was empty. But then, a quiet tap, tap, tap echoed from the hallway. Not on the door, on the mirror inside her closet. Emily's stomach twisted into knots. She had shattered the bathroom mirror, but there was another one, her closet. Slowly, she stepped forward. The wooden floor creaked under her weight. The tapping continued. She reached out a trembling hand and gripped the closet handle. The moment her fingers touched the cold metal, her phone vibrated violently. A new message. Unknown. Number. Don't open. It. Her heart stopped. Why was it warning her now? The tapping ceased. In the silence, Emily could hear her own ragged breathing. She knew she had two choices. Open the closet and see what was waiting, or walk away and pretend none of this was happening. Her fingers tightened around the handle. She made her choice. She yanked the door open and screamed. Chapter 15. The Reflection. That wasn't hers. Emily stumbled back, her throat tightening with terror. Inside the closet, the mirror stood intact. Perfect. Unshattered. But her reflection wasn't right. It was her. Same hair, same clothes, same wide, terrified eyes, but the moment she moved, her reflection didn't. Emily lifted her shaking hand. The girl in the mirror just stared back. No movement, no imitation, just watching. And then, the reflection smiled. Oh, slow creeping grin that stretched across its face like something inhuman was wearing her skin. Emily's legs locked. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. The reflection took a step forward, but Emily hadn't moved. Her body turned to ice. The glass between them shuddered, and then, without warning. The reflection pressed its hand against the inside of the mirror. The glass rippled like water. It was trying to come through. Emily stumbled back, heart hammering. Her phone vibrated again. A new message. Unknown. Number, run. She didn't need to be told twice. She bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Her pulse thundered as she backed away. The mirror inside the closet rattled violently. Something was trying to get out, and for the first time Emily realized it wasn't just watching anymore. It wanted to switch places. It wanted to be her. And if she looked too long, it would be. Chapter 16. Nowhere is safe, Emily bolted out of the bedroom, heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. She didn't stop running until she reached the living room, where the only source of light was the dim glow of the street lamps outside. Her hands were shaking. She grabbed her phone, desperately typing out a message to her best friend Ava. Emily, something's wrong. You need to come over, please. She pressed send. The little delivered sign appeared, and then, right before her eyes, it disappeared. Not read, not undelivered, just gone, like she had never sent it at all. Her breath hitched. The apartment was silent. No wind outside, no distant hum of cars, no night sounds at all. It was like the world outside had stopped existing. She glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door stood slightly open, but she had slammed it shut. A soft creak came from inside the room. Emily took a slow step back. Something was in there. Something that wasn't her. She needed to get out. Now. Her fingers wrapped around the front door handle. Locked. She twisted the knob harder, panic rising in her throat. Still locked. But she hadn't locked it. A cold realization hit her. Something wanted her to stay. Then, her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. You can't leave. Emily's breath caught in her chest. Her hand shook as she read the words. Then, before she could react, the lights flickered, and a voice, low, almost like a whisper against her ear, spoke from behind her. Turn around. Chapter 17. The wrong Ava Emily spun around, fists clenched, heart racing, but there was no one there, only the shadows. Then, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. From Ava. Emily's hands trembled as she pressed accept and put the phone to her ear. Ava? She whispered. At first, silence. Then, Emily, where are you? Emily's stomach clenched. What do you mean? I'm at my apartment. I texted you. No, you didn't. Ava's voice sounded off, distant, flat. Emily glanced at her screen. The call duration was 0 power, but she was still hearing Ava's voice. Emily, come outside. Emily's breath hitched. Outside? She echoed. I'm waiting for you, Ava's voice said, softer now. Emily crept toward the window, her fingers gripping the curtain. Slowly, she peeked outside. Ava was there, standing on the sidewalk, looking up at Emily's window. But something was wrong. She wasn't moving, not shifting from foot to foot, not glancing at her phone. She just stood there, staring. Then, without moving her lips, Ava's voice came through the phone again. Come outside, Emily. Emily's stomach turned. She dropped the phone, because the girl outside wasn't Ava. Ava never wore a white dress. Ava's eyes weren't completely black, and Ava was still out of town. Chapter 18. Something is copying. The Emily stumbled backward, her breath shallow. The thing outside her window tilted its head. It knew she saw it. And then, it smiled. Not a normal smile, a slow, stretching grin, like its face wasn't meant to move that way. Emily felt her knees weaken. This wasn't just her reflection trying to replace her. It was copying others, too. Her friends, her life, her world. Her fingers scrambled for the phone on the floor. She had to warn Ava. But when she picked it up, the screen was filled with missed calls from Ava. The real Ava. Emily's pulse spiked. She answered immediately. "Ava," she gasped. "Emily, finally. What's going on? You've been sending me the weirdest texts. Are you okay?" Emily's blood turned to ice. She swallowed. "Ava, listen to me. Where are you right now?" A pause. "I just got back. I'm outside your building. I was about to call you to..." Emily froze. Her grip on the phone tightened. Her voice came out as a shaky whisper. "Ava, you're not outside my window right now, are you?" Silence. Then, "What? No, I'm still by the parking lot. Why?" Emily's breath hitched. Her eyes snapped back to the figure on the sidewalk. It was still staring, still smiling, still pretending. Emily couldn't breathe because now it was waving at her. Chapter 19. Now it knows my name. Emily's fingers tightened around her phone. Her entire body screamed not to move. The figure outside kept waving. Then, it took a step forward. Emily gasped and stumbled back from the window. "Ava," she whispered into the phone. "It's moving." "Emily, what's moving? What are you talking about?" Emily's pulse was wild. She forced herself to look again. The thing was closer, now standing in front of the building's entrance. Emily's stomach twisted. She backed toward the hallway, keeping her phone pressed to her ear. "It's not you," she said. "It looks like you, but it's not." Silence. Then Ava spoke, her voice sharp, serious. "Emily, listen to me. Whatever you do, don't..." "Let it in." Emily swallowed. "I wasn't planning to." Then, knock, knock, knock. Emily's heart stopped. It was at her door. Chapter 20. The thing in the hallway. Emily didn't move. She didn't breathe. The knocking was slow, patient. Knock, knock, then a voice. "Emily?" It sounded exactly like Ava. Emily pressed a hand over her mouth, stepping back toward the kitchen. "Emily, open up." Another knock. Emily felt a cold sweat drip down her spine. She clutched her phone. Ava was still on the line. "Emily," her real friend whispered. "That's not me." Emily knew. She knew, but hearing Ava say it made her stomach drop. Then, the doorknob turned. Emily's breath hitched. She grabbed the nearest object, a knife from the kitchen counter. The handle twisted harder. Then, the voice on the other side of the door changed. It stretched, becoming something unnatural. "Emily..." Emily's grip on the knife tightened, and then silence. No more knocking. No more movement. Only the sound of her own rapid breathing. Ava's voice trembled through the phone. "Emily? Is it gone?" Emily's throat was dry. I don't know." She took slow, careful steps toward the door, pressed her ear against the wood. Silence. Then, a whisper right next to her ear. "I know you're in there," Emily screamed. Chapter 21. It left something behind. Emily stumbled back from the door, nearly dropping the knife. She ran to the bathroom, locking herself inside. Her chest heaved, her fingers shook. The voice, that voice, had been too close. Ava was still on the phone. "Emily, what happened?" Emily tried to breathe. It whispered to me. It knew I was there. Ava cursed under her breath. I'm coming up. Stay where you are." Emily shut her eyes. She didn't want Ava anywhere near this, but before she could protest, something thumped outside the bathroom door. Emily's blood froze, a slow, dragging sound, like something was being pushed across the floor. Emily stared at the door. Her whole body screamed, "Don't open it!" Then, a soft piece of paper slid under the door. Emily's heart stopped. With shaky fingers, she picked it up. Her breath caught in her throat, because on the paper, written in jagged, childlike handwriting, was her own name. Chapter 22. What's behind the door? Emily's hands trembled as she stared at the paper. Her name, written in jagged, uneven strokes. The air felt thick, pressing against her chest. She could still hear the faint dragging sound outside the bathroom. Something was there. Her phone was still clutched in her hand. "Ava," she whispered. "It wrote my name." Silence. Then Ava's voice came back, but it was barely above a breath. "Don't touch it." Emily dropped the paper like it had burned her. Ava's voice trembled. "Emily, listen to me. You need to get out of there. Now." Emily swallowed. Her whole body wanted to obey. But then, something changed. The dragging sound stopped. The silence was deafening. Emily's breath hitched. And then, knock. Knock. Not from the apartment door. From the bathroom door. Emily's stomach dropped. Her grip on the phone tightened. She could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. The knock came again, soft, patient, then, "Emily." She stiffened. It was her own voice, coming from the other side of the door. Ava's panicked whisper crackled through the phone. "Do not answer it." Emily couldn't move. Her breath felt trapped in her chest. The voice, her voice, spoke again. "Emily, please open the door. I'm scared." Emily's stomach turned. It sounded exactly like her. The same tone, the same fear. No, that wasn't her. Ava's voice came back, sharp and desperate. "Emily, I'm outside your building. I'm coming up." Another knock, a little louder this time. "Emily, let me in." Emily shut her eyes. No, she couldn't. She wouldn't. But then, the doorknob twisted. Emily's breath stopped. The door, it was unlocking. Itself. Chapter 23. It's in the room. The lock clicked. The door creaked open just an inch. Cold air slipped through the gap. Emily's entire body went rigid. She couldn't see what was outside, didn't want to. She pressed herself against the wall, gripping the knife. The door inched open further. Ava's voice came from her phone, frantic. "Emily, are you still there?" Emily forced herself to answer. "It's opening the door," Ava cursed. "Get out now." Emily's knuckles were white against the knife handle. Then, a shadow moved outside the door, and something stepped inside. Emily's breath stilled. She couldn't see its face, couldn't move, but she felt it. A presence, standing just beyond her. Vision. Then, ever so slowly, it turned its head toward her. Emily's blood ran cold. The thing, it had her face, but the eyes. The eyes were wrong, too dark, too empty. It smiled. Then, in her exact voice, it whispered, "You should have let me in sooner." Chapter 24. No way out. Emily couldn't breathe. The thing that looked like her stepped forward, its bare feet soundless against the tile floor. She pressed her back against the wall, gripping the knife tighter. This isn't real. This isn't real. But it was. The imposter tilted its head, that eerie smile never fading. Emily. It said her name like it owned it, Her chest tightened. It was using her voice, but wrong. Softer. Mocking. "You shouldn't be afraid," it whispered. "I'm you." Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. No, you're not." She took a shaky step toward the door, but the imposter moved at the same time, mirroring her, like a reflection that wasn't hers anymore. Ava's voice crackled through the phone still clenched in Emily's hand. "Emily, I'm at your door, let me in." Emily's lips parted to scream, "Don't!" But the imposter turned toward the bathroom door. Then, it moved fast. Too fast. A blur of motion. Emily barely had time to react before the thing reached out and snatched the phone from her hands. Her stomach dropped. The imposter raised the phone to its ear. Then, in Emily's exact voice, it said, "Ava, it's okay. You can come in." Emily's blood ran cold. The call cut off. And then, from the hallway, outside, she heard the front door unlock. Chapter 25. The imposter's plan, no. Emily lunged for the phone, but the imposter stepped back effortlessly, holding it just out of reach. Her pulse thundered. Ava was coming. She would walk right into whatever trap this thing had set. Emily's eyes darted around the bathroom, searching for anything she could use, but the imposter just watched her. Smiling, Emily took a slow, deep breath. She had to think, had to stay calm. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. The imposter tilted its head, as if considering the question. Then, it moved closer. Emily's breath hitched. It was inches away now. For the first time, she could see every detail. The skin was almost perfect, but just slightly too smooth. The hair moved like hers, but it cast no shadow. The eyes, black and hollow. The imposter leaned in. Emily's own breath hit her cheek. Then it whispered, "Because you let me in." Emily's throat tightened. "I didn't," she choked out. "I never let you in." The imposter smiled wider. "You did the moment you saw me." A cold shiver ran down Emily's spine. Then, the front door creaked open. Ava had just walked in. Emily's chest clenched. "Ava, no!" The bathroom light went out. Darkness swallowed everything, and in the pitch black, Emily heard the imposter laugh. Chapter 26. The wrong Emily. Emily couldn't see. Couldn't move. She tried to call out, tried to warn Ava, but her voice wouldn't come. Then, from outside the bathroom, Emily, Ava's voice, Emily's real Ava. She was here, she was walking, straight into it. Emily forced her body to move. She stumbled forward, arms outstretched, hands hitting nothing. No walls, no door, just empty space. No, this wasn't right. She'd been in her bathroom, but now she was nowhere. A thick, heavy blackness pressed around her, like she was floating or falling. She took a shaky step forward, and the darkness rippled. Then, Ava screamed. Emily's stomach dropped. She bolted forward, toward the sound, toward Ava, toward the apartment she knew was still there. And then, the darkness shattered. Light rushed back in, and Emily wasn't in the bathroom anymore. She was standing in the living room. Her chest heaved. Her skin felt icy cold, and across the room, near the entrance, Ava stood frozen, her wide, terrified eyes locked on Emily. No, not on Emily. On the other Emily. The imposter stood right beside her. And Ava. Ava couldn't tell the difference. Emily's breath caught. The imposter turned to Ava, that same eerie smile on its face. Then, in a voice identical to hers, "Ava, it's me." Chapter 27. The test Emily's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She could see it. herself, standing right beside Ava. Same hair, same face, same voice. But it wasn't her. Ava's face twisted with confusion. Her eyes flicked between the two Emilys, her breathing shallow and fast. What the hell? She stammered, stepping back. What is this? Emily opened her mouth to speak, but the imposter was faster. Ava, it said, voice steady, calm, too calm. It's me. Emily clenched her fists. No, 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 no. Don't listen to it, she shouted. Ava, that thing, she's lying. The imposter turned toward her with a sickeningly perfect expression of concern. She's not me. Ava's breath hitched. Emily could see the fear in her friend's eyes. Ava wasn't stupid. She knew something was wrong, but she had no way of knowing which Emily to trust, and that's exactly what the imposter wanted. Emily's hands shook. She had to think. Fast. If Ava made the wrong choice, if she trusted the imposter, Emily would never get her life back. The imposter's eyes gleamed. It stepped toward Ava, reaching out a hand. Ava, come on. Emily froze. Then, without thinking, she moved, lunged forward, and grabbed Ava's wrist. Ava gasped. Emily's fingers tightened. Ava, listen to me, she whispered, voice urgent. You know me. You know the real me. Ava's pulse raced under Emily's grip. She hesitated. The imposter tilted its head, then let out a soft, amused laugh. Oh, this is fun, it murmured. Emily's stomach churned. She looked at Ava, desperate. Ask me something, she pleaded. Anything, something only I would know. Ava's lips parted. Her eyes darted between Emily and the imposter, her best friend, and a perfect copy. For a moment, she just stood there. Then, she spoke. What's the first thing I ever said to you? Emily's breath caught. Her mind raced back. Years, memories, moments. Then, she had it. She looked Ava straight in the eyes and said, I like your jacket. Ava sucked in a sharp breath. Her fingers tightened in Emily's grip. Her eyes widened. And the imposter. The imposter didn't say anything. For the first time, it hesitated. Then, its face changed. The smile twisted, warped, became something wrong. Something inhuman. Emily barely had time to react before. The imposter's hand shot out, straight for her throat. Chapter 28. The escape, Emily gasped. The imposter's fingers clamped around her neck, tight, ice cold. Her pulse pounded. She struggled. Tried to break free, but the grip was inhumanly strong. Ava! She choked out. Ava snapped out of it. Let her go! She screamed. She grabbed a glass vase from the table and smashed it over the imposter's head. The imposter staggered, but it didn't let go. Emily's lungs burned. The room blurred. Her vision darkened. Then, Ava grabbed the kitchen knife and plunged it into the imposter's side. A sickening crack. Emily expected blood. There was none. The imposter froze. Then, it screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was distorted, twisted. The room shook, and suddenly, the imposter let go. Emily collapsed, gasping for air. Ava grabbed her hand. Run! They bolted, past the hallway, through the front door, into the cold night air. Emily's legs burned, but she didn't stop. Not until they were 3 blocks away. Not until she turned back and saw the apartment. The windows were dark, the door wide, open, but the imposter was nowhere in sight. Emily shuddered. Ava's fingers dug into her wrist. What the hell was that? Ava panted. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear. The imposter was still out there, And it wasn't finished. Not yet. Chapter 29. The evidence. Emily's breath was still uneven as they stumbled into Ava's apartment, slamming the door shut behind them. Her throat ached from where the imposter's fingers had wrapped around it. She reached up, running shaky fingers along her skin. It wasn't bruised, but it felt like it should be. Ava double-checked the locks before turning back to Emily, eyes wide with panic. "That wasn't human," Ava whispered. "That wasn't you, Emily. What the hell was that thing?" Emily didn't answer right away. She walked to the couch and sank onto it, burying her face in her hands. "I don't know," she admitted, "but it knows me. It knows everything about me." She looked up, meeting Ava's gaze. "And it wants to replace me." Ava inhaled sharply, pacing the small living room. She stopped suddenly, turning back to Emily. "It hesitated when I asked you that question," Ava said. "That means it doesn't know everything." Emily straightened, realization hitting her. She was right. The imposter had paused. If it truly was a perfect copy, it wouldn't have needed to think. Which meant there was a way to expose. And Ava grabbed her laptop and sat down next to Emily. "We need to figure out where it came from. Something like this doesn't just appear out of nowhere." Emily leaned closer as Ava started typing, searching for anything related to doppelgangers, paranormal copies, alternate realities. Most of it was myth, legend, stories from Reddit threads. Nothing solid. Then, something caught Emily's eye. Forum post. The title made her blood turn cold. "I saw myself, but it wasn't me." Ava clicked on it, and they both leaned in. The post was dated 3 years ago. The user described seeing an exact copy of themselves standing outside their house, staring at them through the window. At first, they thought it was a hallucination, until it spoke. "It knew things about me that no one else did. It smiled exactly like I do. But there was something off. Like it was wearing my face instead of actually being me. It tried to get inside. It kept knocking, over and over. I locked the doors, but the knocking didn't stop for hours. The next morning, I found footprints outside my window. A week later, my neighbor saw me walking outside, except I wasn't home. I was at work. I don't think I got rid of it. I think it's still watching me." The post ended abruptly. No updates, no responses. Emily shivered. That was exactly what was happening to her. Ava scrolled down, but the user's account had been deleted. "We need to find out who this person was," Emily said, heart pounding. "Maybe they figured out how to stop it." Ava hesitated before clicking on the profile. Nothing. No history, no other posts. It was like the person had vanished. Emily's stomach twisted. Ava sighed, rubbing her temples. "Okay. If we can't find them, then we need another plan. We need evidence." Emily blinked. "Evidence?" Ava looked at her seriously. "We're going back." Emily's heart stopped. "What?" "We need proof, Emily. Cameras, video. Something to prove that this thing exists." Emily felt cold all over. Going back meant seeing it again. Meant risking. Ava grabbed her hand. "I won't let it replace you." Emily swallowed hard. She wasn't ready, but she had no choice. Chapter 30. The return. They packed quickly. Ava grabbed her phone, a flashlight, and a small pocket knife. Emily took her old digital camera, the one she used for college projects. It had night vision. If the imposter was still there, they would catch it on tape. The streets were eerily quiet as they walked back. Too quiet. No cars, no voices, just the sound of their footsteps. Emily clutched her camera tightly. Ava glanced at her. "You okay?" "No," Ava smirked. At least you're honest. They reached Emily's apartment building. The door was still wide open. The sight made Emily's stomach twist. It was waiting. They stepped inside cautiously. The air was heavy, like the building was holding its breath. Emily turned on her camera. The red recording light blinked to life. Ava nudged her. "Let's start in your bedroom." Emily swallowed and nodded. The hallway was dark. Too dark. Even with the flashlight, the shadows seemed wrong. When they reached the bedroom door, Emily hesitated. What if it was waiting inside? Ava gave her a reassuring look before pushing the door open. The room looked normal. Bed, desk, window. But something felt off. Emily raised the camera and scanned the room through the lens. For a second, nothing. Then, the screen flickered. Emily froze. The window. There was something in the reflection. A shadow. A figure standing right behind them. Emily's breath hitched. She spun around. Nothing. Ava saw her panic. "What? What is it?" Emily looked back at the screen. The figure was closer now. It was watching them. And then, it smiled. Chapter 31. The Reflection. Lies Emily's breath caught in her throat. The figure on the camera screen wasn't just standing there anymore. It was moving. It stepped closer, its body shifting unnaturally, like it was learning how to walk for the first time. Its head tilted and Emily's stomach dropped. The smile. It stretched too far, too wide, as if the skin wasn't made to fit the face it was wearing. She spun around, pointing her flashlight directly at the spot where it should have been. Nothing. Ava grabbed her wrist. "Emily, what did you see?" Emily turned the camera screen so Ava could see. The figure was still there, standing behind them. Ava's face drained of color. "Holy..." Then the screen glitched, distorting the image with static. The figure jerked forward. Emily dropped the camera. The moment it hit the floor, the entire room went black. The flashlight flickered violently, the walls groaning like the building itself was shifting. A whisper crawled through the darkness. "You don't belong here." Emily's chest tightened. The voice, it sounded like her own. Ava fumbled for the flashlight, her breathing ragged. "We need to get out of here. Now." But as soon as she took a step, the air thickened, like they were wading through invisible tar. Emily reached for the camera, her fingers shaking, and as soon as she touched it, the lights snapped back on. The room was silent again. Ava exhaled sharply, looking around. What the hell was that? Emily gripped the camera tightly. The screen was frozen on the last image captured, her bedroom mirror. But the reflection wasn't normal. It showed the room. It showed Ava. But Emily wasn't there. Her throat tightened. "Ava, look." Ava's eyes widened as she realized, in the mirror, Emily didn't exist. Chapter 32. The Missing Reflection. They both stared at the screen, their bodies frozen with shock. Ava's voice was unsteady. "That's not possible." Emily felt numb. "Then explain it." Ava hesitated, then turned to the mirror in real life. She grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her toward it. "Look for yourself." Emily resisted at first, dread curling in her stomach. But she forced herself to step forward. Her breath caught. The mirror showed Ava standing alone. The space beside her, where Emily should have been, was empty. Ava lifted her hand and waved at the glass. Her reflection mimicked the movement. Emily did the same. Nothing. No reflection. Her stomach twisted into knots. She was standing right there. How could the mirror not see her? Ava turned to her, voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, what if..." She swallowed. "What if the thing we saw earlier wasn't the imposter? What if..." We are. Emily staggered back. No. She gripped her own arms, feeling the warmth of her skin, the way her chest rose and fell, the rapid beat of her heart. She was real. She had to be real. Ava rubbed her temples. We need answers. Maybe there's a way to fix this, to knock, knock. The sound came from the front door. Emily and Ava both snapped their heads toward it. Knock, knock. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Emily's mouth went dry. Someone was outside. Knock. Ava swallowed. Don't open it. Emily wasn't planning to. But then, a voice. Emily? Her heart stopped, because the voice wasn't just familiar. It was hers. Final chapter. The Truth Behind the Reflection. Part 1. The knock at the door echoed through the silent apartment. Emily's breath came in short, panicked bursts. Her own voice, from the other side of the door. Ava grabbed her arm. Do not open it. Emily wasn't planning to, but her body felt like it wasn't entirely her own anymore. Her fingers twitched at her side, itching to reach for the handle. The knock came again. Emily, I know you're in there. The air grew heavy. The temperature in the room dropped so drastically that their breaths fogged in front of them. Ava grabbed Emily's wrist, grounding her. Think. If that's really you, then who the hell are you? Emily clenched her jaw. She wasn't going to let the fear swallow her whole. What do you want? She called out. Silence. Then, laughter. Soft, mocking, her own laughter. You already know the answer. The mirror flickered. Emily turned sharply, her stomach knotting. For the first time since she lost her reflection, something moved inside the glass. A shape. A figure. A girl stepped into view. She was identical to Emily, but something was wrong. Her eyes were too dark. Her smile stretched too wide. Emily's throat tightened. The reflection lifted a hand, one covered in cracks, as if she were made of broken porcelain. You don't belong here anymore. Emily's body locked up. The floor beneath her seemed to shift. The walls warped. The entire apartment felt like it was bending toward the mirror. Ava grabbed Emily's shoulders. We have to go, now. But when they turned to run, the door was gone. All that remained was the mirror, and the figure inside it was stepping forward. Final chapter. The Truth Behind the Reflection. Part 2. Emily's heartbeat thundered in her ears. The mirror figure took another step closer, and then another. With each movement, the world around them warped further. The walls cracked, like reality itself was shattering. Ava yanked Emily backward. We have to break it. Emily's pulse spiked. What if that makes it worse? Ava's jaw tightened. What could be worse than this? Emily didn't have an answer. The figure in the mirror was almost through. Her cracked hand reached out, pressing against the glass. The surface rippled, stretching thin. And then, a voice. Give me back my place. Emily felt something pulling at her. The space around her shifted. The walls stretched, bending inward. The air felt wrong, thick with something unnatural. Ava screamed. Emily turned just in time to see the reflection fully step out. For a fraction of a second, they stood face to face. Identical. Then, the reflection lunged. Emily barely had time to react before she was yanked backward, into the mirror. The world flipped, everything distorted. Emily hit the ground hard. Her vision blurred, and when she scrambled to her feet, her stomach dropped. She was inside the mirror. Ava was on the other side, pounding against the glass, screaming, but she couldn't hear her. Emily's own reflection now stood in her place. Smiling. Her imposter turned to Ava, perfectly mimicking her movements, her expressions. Then, she spoke. What's wrong, Ava? Her voice was exactly the same. Perfectly hers. Ava froze. Emily slammed her fists against the glass, but the imposter ignored her. Ava took a step back, confusion and fear flickering across her face. Emily? It's me, the imposter said. We should go. We need to get out of here. Emily's stomach turned. No. No, no, no. She pounded harder on the glass, but her hands barely made a sound. She watched in horror as Ava hesitated, then reached for the imposter's hand. No, Emily screamed. The imposter grinned. And then they left. The door reappeared, and the imposter walked away with Emily's life. The moment the door shut, the glass solidified. Emily was trapped. The mirror world was silent. Dark. Cold. She turned slowly, her chest tightening. The reflection world was empty. Except for the other mirrors, hundreds of them, each one holding someone else, frozen, trapped. They stared back at her with hollow, hopeless eyes. And for the first time, Emily realized she had never been the first, and she wouldn't be the last. The mirror always needs a reflection, and now it has hers. The end.